Yeah, all right. We are live.
We are live.
Yay. John coming in from Goa, from India.
Goa, India, the west coast of India.
Mm-hmm.
I went and actually looked at the Arabian Sea, as this part of the Indian Ocean is referred to,
Mm-hmm.
which is only about a 10-minute walk from where we are. So, uh, yeah, it's beautiful. Very different from Rajasthan.
Yeah.
We were actually delighted to leave Rajasthan, as beautiful as parts of it are. It's just a different atmosphere. So, and we'll be here for another 9 days, I think, and then we'll
Mm-hmm.
be heading back slowly home to Chicago, where we'll at least get part of the winter, I think. So it's one advantage of having been here. We've missed the entire winter.
Pretty much.
Yeah,
Well,
so
it's been a hard winter too. Yeah, for those of us
I know, I
in the
know,
northern
I know.
U.S.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, the topic today is joy, which is a
Joy.
topic that's close to my heart and close to many people's heart, I think. But I'm curious. I know you said you've recently recorded a YouTube video on it, but I'm curious to know the context that you put it in, um, and then I'll riff from there probably, because it's
Yeah, yeah,
that word. I mean, in the early teachings, it means different things
yeah,
in many ways. Yeah.
yeah. No, and I mean the video that I've prepared is not going to be out for a few weeks yet. So for folks
Okay.
who are sitting, what is it, on tenter hooks about it, you have to wait, but it'll be out eventually. And I mean, basically the idea behind the thought, and anyway, but behind the video is just, nowadays we kind of need some joy in the world. It seems to me anyway, and I think a lot of people, when you come to Buddhist practice or consider Buddhist practice, even from within the tradition, there is a kind of a framing of it as, very austere and, interested in, quiet and calm and letting things go and that kind of, and that's not false, but there's this other aspect, I think, to practice, which involves joy, that is also critical and something that sometimes we really need, like perhaps like now. And so, I mean, that's
Really?
part. Yeah, yeah. So that's
Yeah.
sort of part of the reason. And yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there are various words in Pali for joy. And in my video, I was explicitly saying, look, I'm going to be a little bit fuzzy here and just sort of group
Good.
together a
Yeah.
bunch of similar terms under the heading of joy.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try to get into the specific differences between them, because it depends on translations and context. And it's the general idea of a pleasant, pleasurable state that we're gaining from our practice is the idea.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and it is also interesting that in the Anapanasati Sutta, it's the fifth of it appears that word
Hmm.
piti appears very quickly in the teaching, of finding
Yeah.
joy. Now that's referring to that one of those specific types of joy that you were mentioning, which is more physically experienced, I think. Um, yeah, and I've been, I gave a talk for Tricycle about it a few years ago, and I taught a class called Finding Joy in the Refuge of Uncertainty, I think.
Mm,
And I'm
yeah.
actually teaching another one now of a similar name. Um, and I think it's really, really important. And I actually try to integrate it into uh, the second of the Eightfold Path of wise intention.
Mm,
So, bringing an intention of joy into our practice, um, uh, which I think can be really helpful for a lot of people. Um, and, because if all the talk about dukkha, of course, sort of like, well, wait a minute, how do I find joy in the midst of dukkha? But that actually is, in a sense, why we practice. Not necessarily to find joy, but at least not to be weighted down by the dukkha.
yeah.
And as you said, I mean, there is so much dukkha, being thrown at us in various forms these days, politically at least, that the idea of bringing joy into our lives is essential, and finding those places of joy, which may arise from little things or big things, but just recognize that those are always there. Um,
Yeah, and one of the ways I was thinking that dukkha can bring joy is when we use it as a vehicle to gain insight into,
of
and we
course,
understand
yeah,
that what we're doing when we're experiencing some of this dukkha, some of this impermanence, is that we're actually learning what our wisdom is increasing. In a sense, we're
right,
learning about the world in a very moment by moment true sense of the way things really are. And if we can frame it and understand it in that way, then indeed I think even a state of dukkha can be, can bring a measure of joy in the insight that we get from it. At least it can.
yeah. I mean, it holds that potential, and I think one of the first whenever I'm teaching about the Four Noble Truths, the third noble truth, there is freedom, there is awakening, there is. We experience those more often than we think, and recognizing those moments is one of the keys to this. It's like, oh yeah, wow, right in this moment, everything is perfect in a sense. Everything is
Yeah.
easeful.
Hmm.
Everything is as it is,
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to make it otherwise.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think a lot of people sort of, I mean, there's a kind of a, among certain approach to practice, I think, is this sort of feeling that any state like that is sort of suspect, and that we shouldn't go there because it's sort of too pleasurable. Um, um, and yet the Buddha himself, when he was searching for the middle path, it was his realization that pleasure itself isn't the problem. It's the kind
right.
of pleasure and the way we hold it that's the problem. And that,
Yeah.
and that there's nothing wrong with celebrating these kinds of moments of insight or freedom, as you say. And and I find it difficult sometimes myself. It's like I want to, I don't want to focus on them because then they'll go away, kind of thing. But it's important, I think, to focus on them, at least to an extent, to give ourselves confidence that we're doing the right thing, that we're on the right path, and to celebrate the little victories, because otherwise it becomes it can become a too austere, I think, a practice.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm recalling, when I'm on more extended retreat, especially on a solo retreat, just uh, taking joy in those moments when I can let go of everything, including who I am.
Mm.
Um, but then finding joy in the stories I tell myself about other people, who are on the retreat, which of course is just what the mind does, and it has no basis in anything. Um, but it's there, and it's like, oh wow, just finding a little humor. I mean, humor and joy are important in terms of practice, but the humor of what the mind will do on retreat, or what the mind does in general. But the other thing I was going to say is that uh, Vidya Mala Birch, who's a wonderful teacher in England, who created the Breathworks Center, um, practices in the Triratna Buddhist order. Wonderful, wonderful teacher. Um, a lot of one of the things, one of the trainings she offers has to do with pain, working with pain, and part of that is recognizing those moments when the pain is suddenly less.
Mm.
For people who are dealing with really serious pain, knowing those moments when the pain is suddenly less, and taking delight and pleasure in that.
Mm.
So it may not be gone, or maybe momentarily gone and then it will come back, but at least recognizing those moments when that which we have been pushing away and we've sort of let go of the resistance, when we recognize by letting go of the resistance, we actually reduce the suffering, and in that moment take pleasure. And yeah, and the joy of samadhi, the joy of tranquility,
Yeah.
is a big one. And it's really important not to get lost in it, but to just take delight in it when it's here,
Yeah.
um, when it arrives. These are really key aspects of practice, I think. The other teaching that I fall back on a lot are the Lojong teachings, um, from the Mahayana tradition, and the slogans.
Hmm.
And there are a couple there are 59 slogans that are part of the 7-point mindfulness trainings. One of which is like every obstacle, is an opportunity.
Hmm.
In other words, every obstacle is a place of practice, and so there are no bad moments. They're all just opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is, um, I have to pull it up here 1 second. Hold on, because it's really key. I think, is be grateful to everyone. Right. So
Mm.
even those people, like, and now this is a hard one, right? Especially right now.
Yeah.
What joy can we take in, the stuff that's coming at us every day from our uh, from he who shall not be named, um, he who claims to be king.
Yeah.
Um, how do we hold that, and how do we actually uh, be grateful for that? That's and I'm not saying it's essential to do that, but how do we work with that obstacle?
Yeah.
How do we work with that difficult being? And how do we possibly find any joy in that? Except that we can recognize, I mean, at least in my experience, taking delight in the joy that is in my life moment to moment, and letting that balance out the nishigas and the dukkha that arises from, at this point, just the anger, right, that's arising from some of these executive orders and stupid comments and things like that.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's really, really important in our practice to like remind ourselves of this. And to me, that's why it's important within the uh, second factor of the Eightfold Path. It's like, okay, can I bring joy to every moment,
Mm.
in one way or another? Um,
That would be hard,
and
but
that,
yeah, that's a good idea.
yeah, it's an aspiration. It's an
Sure. Yeah.
aspiration,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's like, okay, or where is the joy in this moment?
Mm.
Can also be a question, an inquiry. So,
Well, I mean, one of the also the one of the ways I would sort of frame joy in the context of this current sort of political environment. One of I mean, a couple of places that the Buddha says are important for joy in the early texts have to do with our own ethical practice and values. And in fact, there's a really nice passage where he's talking to his son Rahula, where he says, if you act well in ways that are beneficial for yourself and others, then take joy in that. Then
yeah,
reflect upon that joyfully, and allow basically celebrate it. And if there's the other thing, the other passage, I think it's from the Dhammapada, in this world of hatred, we're not going to be full of hatred. In this world of
right,
anger, we're going to be joyful. And it's sort of the same way. It's sort of like, there's an aspect of course, all of this that let me put it this way: we can't control the world. We can't control what's going on as much as we would like to. Um, uh, more than the tiniest little bit, any one of us. But we can at least, in some small way, take control. Again, even in our own case, it's hard to take complete control. You can't, but we can do what we can to act beneficially towards people around us, and
Yeah.
be a light, at least in our local area, among our friends, our family, our community, our sangha. And that's not nothing, and then take joy in that, and celebrate it,
Yeah.
celebrate
Of
your
course.
friendships and your good experiences with people around you, and helping somebody with whatever it is that you can help them with.
Yeah.
It doesn't, whether it's generosity in the terms of finances, or generosity in terms of time, or effort, or just lending a kind ear to somebody who wants to talk about how terrible things are. There's so many ways that we can be helpful, and take joy in that. And not only is there nothing wrong with taking joy in it, the Buddha explicitly says you should take joy in doing these things. That's part of the
Yeah.
practice, is to celebrate them.
That's part of, yeah. And that's, there's the joy of Sangha, which is
Exactly.
really what you're talking about. It's like within
Hmm.
community. Not, it's not to say that Sangha doesn't also have its moments of dukkha. It does, but then when those are resolved, there's joy that we take in that. And yeah, the Dhammapada that you're talking about, I have it actually up in front of me. I think it's called happiness. Is that the one you mean? Let us
I
live
think
so
so. Yeah.
very
Yeah.
happily, loving among the hostile people. Let us live with love.
Yep.
Yeah, it's all about that. Now, of course, uh,
Easier said than done, I know.
yeah, and it's like if you're living in a delightful community and you're being fed by the community around you and everybody's taking care of you, might be easy, but it isn't because there's whenever any number of people are together, there will always be things that come up, and those get resolved. And you know, uh, so we do. We. I think this is why there's an. It's important as a mindfulness practice to remind ourselves of this, to remember to have this attitude of joy, and remember that we've had this attitude of joy. So even in those moments where we have fallen into great despair and grief, uh, can we remember that, and at least even the remembering of it can uh, make a difference in that moment.
Hmm.
And we can even look at moment like when somebody's died and there's a funeral and we're celebrating their lives, and usually somebody brings in something hilarious about someone, and we all take delight in that, and those moments are really important. And so even in the midst of grief, remembering the joy that this person brought to you. And so these are all part of practice. They're part of the teachings in one way or another. Um, and when it comes to that physical aspect of joy, um, there is something there is an energy that arises from that physically,
Mm.
and that's also worth kind of acknowledging when we're in the midst of it. Um, this is somewhat related, but we've talked about Vedana enough, to talk about pleasant and unpleasant, and how do we know, and what's the experience, right? And I may have even brought this into one of our shows earlier, and it happened a little bit today. Um, there's there's something when I see a golden retriever, that I have this response, um, and it's a physical response. It's like, oh, they're generally always such happy dogs, and that has an impact on me. And I think that's one of the reasons people have. And you said you just got two kittens.
We just
You
got
know,
two kittens, yeah, and I
that's
have the
one of the
same
reasons.
reaction. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of the reasons people have pets is because
Yeah.
they actually create they take us out of our mind, our thinking mind enough, and we just respond
Yeah.
to the mere interaction. Um, and that's really key,
Yeah.
because it's our our thinking mind that will generally um, get in the way of joy. I think
Mm. It
it's like,
can, yeah, for
and
sure.
yeah, I mean, even like even now, it's like um, here we are, not going through the winter that you're going through, and certainly not the winter that we would be experiencing in Chicago at this moment, you know, and we could feel guilty about it when we talk to friends, but no,
No,
we're here. I'm going to take
exactly.
delight in that,
Right,
and
yeah, you should.
yeah, and we'll get a taste of it when we get back in 2 weeks, I presume.
Yeah.
Um, and then think of how we feel when the sun suddenly comes out and the temperature goes up 20 degrees, and it's like, oh, you know. And I do miss the winter. I miss the snow. So um, when I don't know how much you've gotten there,
We've
but
gotten quite a bit. Yeah, we have gotten quite. We still have quite a bit on the ground. So yeah, it's
yeah,
been a pretty deep winter, which I don't mind.
right. Well,
You
you don't
know,
have to go anywhere
I don't have to. Yeah, I don't have
generally.
to. Generally, I mean, I
Yeah,
work at home, but yeah, I don't have to go
right,
too far usually.
right. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I was gonna one more thing I was gonna touch on with pets is I always think when I think of pets, I think of a John Brahms suggestion to begin metta practice by focusing on a pet, because for
Hmm.
many people a pet is the easiest way for them to generate that feeling of kindness, of loving kindness, because it just
Yeah.
sort of it just I mean the kindness that you will feel towards a pet is this kind of unconditional kindness, because there's no I won't say there's no, but there's so little there's so little conflict there. And, it's just a very wholesome kind of full kindness and love that a pet will show you, that is great. It's
Right.
wonderful.
Well, this is a whole other podcast, but
Yeah.
let's just say that dogs generally offer complete unconditional kindness. I'm not so sure about cats,
Oh, they do.
but
Oh, they do. They do. Yeah. Once you get to know them, yeah, absolutely. But it's a different
okay,
kind of feeling. They have a different,
yeah,
that
that can be
they're
somewhat aloof.
yeah, I mean, they're more their own being. They have their own sort of autonomy, but in that
Okay,
autonomy, they're very, very loving. At least in my
okay.
experience.
We will save this for another podcast. Yeah, yeah, we'll have to come up with a good name for that one.
That's right. That's
Um,
right.
yeah. So yeah. Um, so joy. Yeah,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
aspects of it.
Yeah. And another, of
Hmm.
course, aspect that I think you've touched on a little bit here has to do with jhana, but I mean, that's extremely important in early Buddhist teaching as sort of the root to joy. I mean, the joy that the Buddha was remembering, the pleasure he was remembering when he was on the road to enlightenment, was that pleasure of that jhana, that deep meditative bliss that he had
Right.
experienced when he was a kid, when he was a child. Um, and that is definitely something that takes time. It's not something that I would say I'm particularly proficient about and know a lot about, but certainly for those who are willing to put the time and effort into it, that is a route directly to a kind of an otherworldly joy within Buddhist practice that can be really stimulating and a wonderful way to keep your practice going.
Yeah, and again, I think that um, that starting with that intention is what can really help with that.
Yeah,
That you're not striving, that you're not um, pushing,
right.
but it's just like uh, I'm bringing joy to this moment. I'm going to settle into this body. I'm going to settle into this breath. I'm going to be fully present moment to moment with this attitude of joy. And as we sort of really um, as the samadhi arises, then there's no uh, the joy is just present. The pleasure is just there. Um, yeah. So, and of course, then the little things in life like coffee.
That's right.
Yeah,
I thought we would get there eventually. Yes, indeed. Joyful.
yeah,
Coffee's very joyful.
yeah, and it brings joy to
Yeah.
us and to others.
Yeah.
And
Energy, joy.
yeah, it's like in India, most of there it's mostly around chai,
That's
tea,
true. Yeah. Mhm.
and yet when you discover a good coffee place in India, it's like wow, it
Oh, I'm
actually
sure.
is here.
I'm sure
And
there's good places. Yeah.
yeah, there are. We've hit the ones in Jaipur for sure. Now we're going to have to find the ones around here. But it's one of the joys of life is to sort of seek out that. So, but that's a rather mundane kind of joy. But yet here it is, and we appreciate anybody who helps us by uh, buying us a cup of coffee, which
Mhm.
you can do online at diggingthedharma.com.
Take joy
Supports.
in that. Take joy in
Oh yeah,
generosity
the
and
joy of generosity.
yeah.
That's a whole other discussion. It just came
Mhm.
up in a sharing circle earlier today, and somebody was talking about it. And just as she was talking about it, the smile was incredible, and it wasn't something that she had really thought about much before. And they were in a place where they were able to be generous in a way that hadn't considered, and it just kind of lit her up.
Mm.
So yeah, so we invite you to light yourself up through generosity
Yes.
and experience that level of joy.
Yeah.
So great. Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, John. Yeah,
And
it's wonderful.
I will see you next week. I think we can make this work next week.
Hmm.
We'll see how the connectivity is. Hopefully we got through this without too many
Yep.
blips.
Hmm.
We'll find out soon when we download it. But yeah, and please leave us comments, send us questions, let us know what topics you'd like us to cover. That would be really helpful, and you can do that through the website,
Yep.
diggingthedharma.com.
Diggingthedharma.com. Indeed.
Did you remember to post it in?
Oh, let me put the banner up just in case somebody
Yeah.
doesn't remember what it is. Here it is.
Okay.
Diggingthedharma.com.
All right, Doug. Until next time.
Great. Great
And
talking with you,
everyone
John.
else, keep digging the Dharma. Be well.